This is WCM's Park Update, a weekly show covering the outdoor hospitality industry, hosted by Ben Quiggle and Mike Gast. During each episode, you'll hear from special guests and campground experts on topics that will help your park flourish. WCM's Park Update is a production of Woodall's Campground Magazine.
Hi, I'm Ben Quiggle, editor of Woodall's Campground Magazine, and this is another edition of WCM's Park Update. Of course, my esteemed colleague Mike Gast is here in Nebraska.
He loves
the weather. He's loving a new place. So maybe they'll find him so he can get his mail at some point. So
yeah, and I haven't put anything on my walls yet because I like feeling like I'm actually sitting in a snowbank. So
yeah. And then our guest today is Kara Sismadia, and she works with the Canadian Camping and RV Council. And Kara, it's snowy up there, right? Or is there not a lot of snow up there?
You know what? We are in the midst of a, I don't even know if this terminology would apply to you guys down there. We're in the midst of a Chinook. So the weather has been lovely and beautiful here at the base of the Rockies for the last, week or so. So we've been seeing above zero temperatures. I'm trying to do the conversion in my head quick. But yeah, we had some really rough go here around prior to the new year, but the last little bit has been really temperate and moderate, which has been great to get out and ski and skate and do all those winter things when it's not,
but a Chinook also means that the wind's blowing about 40 miles an hour, right?
Well, yeah, there's that. But it's funny, I'm so impacted by sun, and it's always sunny here. Even if it's windy, even if it's minus 40, the sun is out, and I will take that every day over gloomy, gray, rainy.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so you live in Calgary, Alberta, and your pictures you show on Facebook, you're like in an Instagram like area like all the time with all the mountains and everything. So it's really beautiful. Mm-hmm. I know here in Michigan it's been really warm too and sunny. So I love the sun. If it was like cold and sunny all the time, it'd be great, but it gets gray and you never see the sun, and that's when it gets depressing. So
yeah, it's not for me. I'll take sunshine every day over that. Yeah.
So we wanted to bring Kara on to talk a little bit about the Canadian Outdoor Hospitality Conference and Expo, which is coming up in like another month, right? What are the dates for that?
Yeah, don't remind me. So February 15th and 16th, we will be hosting virtually again for our third time in a row here. And that for sure was a tough decision for our board to make that call to stay virtual again. But coming up February 15th and 16th, obviously there's a couple of great perks to staying virtual in terms of accessibility and stuff, but definitely some hurdles there too.
Yeah, so refresh my history a little bit. So did you guys used to do an in-person version of this before COVID, and then you had to switch to virtual, I guess?
So the timeline is a little bit longer than that. So the last time there was a national level conference was, several years ago, before my time. So I can't say exactly when it was. I don't know what year it would have been. It's before my time in the dealing with the association and participating, even before I was a board member. So several years now. So part of the reason that event stopped was we were seeing difficulty with gathering in such a large country, people in one central location, and some hurdles around that kind of thing, which I'm sure, Arvik and those guys down in your neck of the woods face too. And then our board had put a national level conference on our 5-year strategic plan back in, I believe it was 2017 or 18. And then we had planned to kind of roll one out for 2021. And we had started talking about that in about 2019. And obviously we got derailed a little bit with what happened in the world. So the virtual one we hosted in 2021 was the first national level conference we saw here in Canada for, I think it's probably 7 or 8 years since the last in-person event had happened. So there's certainly in 21, there was big appetite, I think, for members to gather in that way in a really collaborative national type event. And so we had great attendance and lots of interest, and it being virtual really facilitated lots of easy attendance. No one had to travel anywhere. And I think also the COVID scenario really created a dynamic where we were all kind of looking for a means to share information with each other and see how the industry was being impacted by this really unprecedented scenario that by that point we were almost a year into. So yeah, it was a perfect storm of interesting variables in that first year for sure. And then 2022 went really well. It was very well attended as well. So I'm excited for 23. It's going to be, you know, another great event. A little bit pared down, not as many days, but fewer sessions. And that's really a result. We did an attendee and member survey requesting feedback on how that event looked and how members would like to see things happen going forward. That's part of why we actually chose the virtual option again. Over 60, almost 65% of respondents to that survey wanted to stay virtual.
Okay.
And so that really dictated that, but really also helped us choose, you know, fewer days, a bit less time. We got tons of great feedback about the types of sessions members and attendees wanted to see. And so that's really helped me build a great agenda for this year.
So walk us through the agenda. Tell us exactly what they can expect to see.
Sure thing. Yeah. Anyone interested can see it at cohce.ca. But basically, we'll have a very similar format to the last couple of years. Day one will open with a great keynote session. We're working on confirming speakers up for that right now and hoping to announce it right away. But then we'll do breakout sessions afterwards in 3 separate tracks. So we'll have a couple of those in like a business basics track, a stay informed track, and then an innovation track. So kind of covering the gamut of all different kinds of business models and where members may be in their ownership journeys and things like that. Then we'll break for lunch and some vendor visit time, and then we'll actually have a second main stage session each of the 2 days after lunch. And some of those kind of bigger topics, we'll actually have a EV session that I think will be really informative. And then again, breakout sessions in the afternoon. Day 2 will look very similar. The only real change will be a kind of final session at the end, final main stage with our awards announcements, where we'll announce the winners of our Campground of the Year, Industry Person of the Year, Rising Star, and Supplier of the Year awards for the whole group, and then thank everyone for joining us.
So is this a membership only conference?
No, we certainly are open to non-members as well. Obviously, our association members get a little price discount. And you know, save a bit of money there, but open to anyone. We do already have registrations from a couple of groups in the States who are going to virtually join us, who obviously, you know, aren't members of our association, but have registered anyway. So anyone, join us.
And I've attended the last 2 virtual ones, and as far as virtual conferences go, I mean, yours is probably the best one I've been to. You know, I think in 2021 and 2020 we were all doing virtual conferences. So and now they've kind of got back to in person, at least down here in the States, and there's a few virtual conferences here and there still, but I really love the format you guys use and the video, the way you guys you know, do the sessions, the networking events. Are you guys still doing, I know you guys used to do like this, I'm gonna screw this up, like where you had like speed dating for like vendors. Are you still going to be doing that this year? Or?
We've actually gotten rid of the speed networking.
Okay.
Yeah. So we had some, that really was, out of all of the components of the past 2 years, that one was the most bogged down by tech issues and things like that. So you know, we've made the tough choice. I really enjoyed those sessions personally. It's kind of made it able for you to quickly touch base with lots of people within, you know, a really short window of time, which is the thing that's missing, in my opinion, from those virtual events. But yeah, no, we've moved away from those. We are going to try to push, so all of our exhibitors will have links directly to their own Zoom rooms where they can kind of, you can connect at any time and meet up on video and things like that. So hopefully that will motivate folks to still network and spend time in conversations with each other, but the dedicated speed dating networking stuff is off the table, which sorry Ben.
No, I mean, I liked it because I think one of the things missing from the virtual shows is that you don't have to meet new people unless you want to. So like you can just like stick, because you know you're on the computer. So I kind of like the speed dating too, because you know it kind of like forced you to maybe talk with people or meet people that you may not have done before. Not that it was something, you know, I guess forced sounds kind of negative, but I mean, like,
did anybody talk to you, Ben?
What?
Yeah.
Did anybody talk to you during this?
You know, surprisingly, I you know did the speed dating and nobody ever talked to me. So
What a shock.
Yeah, nobody, for clarity for everyone out there, nobody was forced to participate in the speed network.
Yeah, nobody was.
You had to choose to log into that and participate. And I'll be honest, that was a bit of a hurdle too, is a lot of folks just didn't log into the networking option. So then you had the same handful of folks kind of getting randomly matched to each other over and over. So, you know, like I said, it was innovative and a great way to address that connection stuff, but we're gonna try to shift things up on that front.
So what can you tell us about the state of the camping industry up there?
Sure, that's such a broad question. Yeah, you know, obviously we're in the midst of winter, so the vast majority of our parks are closed, and you know, I think right now this time of the year is really kind of re-strategized work, get prepared for next year phase for most of our operators. But in general, in a broad sense, you know, it has been a really successful couple of years for campgrounds in this country. We have seen in the last 2 years a big shift in some of the ownership models. You know, we're seeing investment groups and things like that buy up properties quite a bit. And so I think that's really going to shift some of the camping scenarios in terms of guest expectations. I think it's going to impact competitive, you know, the necessary level of competitiveness that some of our operators are going to have to, you know, step up in terms of competing with these big groups that have lots of resources and things like that, to add things like pools and all kinds of incredible amenities and stuff. So yeah, overall, I mean, we've got tons of campers in this country. I know in my province, specifically here in Alberta, we have the highest per capita RV ownership. We certainly have site inventory issues. I would love to see us still, we're still facing development hurdles that, you know, if we could get 100 more RV parks in this province, we'd fill them. And so there's limitation on some of those fronts, but overall, we've got tons of new RVs on the road over the last couple of years. Those folks are going to continue to camp, and you know, I think we're seeing a shift in terms of the ability for, or the willingness for guests to book as long in advance. They're kind of waiting and not booking as far in advance, but typically our average length of stay is a bit longer. Folks are staying, you know, 3 to 5 nights instead of 2 to 4. I think 23 will be interesting to see how that stuff carries through from last year. Obviously 2021 was a banner year for everybody, and I don't think anyone expected to stay at that crazy high level of demand, but hopefully we can maintain as much longevity as possible through 2023. And yeah.
So how about campers flowing across the border? Did the campers from the States come back?
Yeah, 2022, we started to see that that shift back to specifically kind of along the Alaska Highway route. And then obviously, down east, lots of our maritime provinces really depend on that traffic.
Mhm.
And that was a bit more limited. They really were cautious about reopening and things like that out there. But we've seen, several of our tourism association groups do a lot of work at the federal government level to advocate for our tourism businesses in 2022, and that really had a big impact on getting things open and operational again. 2023 is definitely, that's a focus, is really bringing back as much of that non-Canadian traffic as possible. So the Americans were also seeing lots of work on the front over in Europe in terms of advertising great package deals and working with those RV rental companies, bringing flights back over from Germany and things like that hadn't been happening for the past couple of years, getting those back into some of our international airports. So yeah, lots of expectation to see American and European guests come back.
Well, I think it's been great for the shows. I think at the glamping show, there were some Canadian visitors there. And then at the KOA conference this past fall, I saw quite a few of the KOA Canadian park owners there. So it was great seeing the Canadians again. So, but I think we'll have to take a break to recognize our sponsor, and we will be back in a few seconds. Thanks. WCM's Park Update is being brought to you by Woodall's Campground Magazine. For over 5 decades, Woodall's Campground Magazine has aimed to provide park owners and operators with the relevant industry news they need to run their businesses more efficiently. As times have changed, so has Woodall's Campground Magazine. Besides just its print publication, which is distributed to more than 14,000 industry professionals every month, the magazine also reaches readers through its various social media platforms, including Facebook at Woodall CM, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Woodall's Campground Magazine also offers a daily e-blast which highlights the top news from the industry. The best part, everything we do is advertiser supported and free to our readers. As the outdoor hospitality industry continues to grow at a rapid pace, it is important to stay up to date on trends and other relevant news. Subscribe to Woodall's Campground Magazine at woodallscm.com. I'm Ben Quiggle, and welcome back to WCM's Park Update. Our guest is Kara Sismadia with the Canadian Camping and RV Council, and I think I'm saying your last name right, Kara.
Yeah, Ben, I
know, it's amazing.
Make a comment and make you and embarrass you.
Usually he doesn't get Smith and Jones right, so this is pretty good.
Yeah.
Compared to my other last name,
your other last name was
the other one was the whole thing. And so I was concerned about this one. I'm really proud of you, Ben. Really.
What was your other one?
Brought again.
Yeah. You were just Kara B. It was kind of like a rap star. So
yeah. Perfect. I'll take it. Yeah. This one, my maiden name, most people have more issues with, so I'm proud of you.
We've been working. I practiced all weekend. So,
wow.
I know.
So what's the vendor situation look like up there for your show and just in general? Did they come out of the pandemic, if we want to say we're out of it, but did most of them survive in good shape, and did they return to a show like yours?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say, in 2021, when we did the first virtual version, the majority of our supplier participants were based in the States, and we're really seeing a shift. 2022, we saw even more Canadian participants, and now in 23 again, even more. So I think that's a combination of brand awareness about the association and the show itself, but also, the exponential kind of growth and success of the industry over the last couple of years has put more focus on it and more ability to kind of see it as a really viable option for a lot of these suppliers. We've had a couple of great supporters come in that are Canadian companies. An electrical component supplier that does like RV site pedestals and EV charging components and things like that, that are based in Ontario, and a couple of glamping partners that have been great supporters the last couple of years. And we're seeing, parks utilize their product, and so they're really seeing a ton of growth and continuing to support. That said, we do have wonderful, incredible support from our suppliers south of the border as well. I can officially announce that CampSpot is once again our title sponsor. They've title sponsored now. This will be the third year in a row. And we're so grateful for their support. They are kind of exponentially growing their base business here in Canada, and we've got tons of parks that really love their product. So we'd love to see that support continue. We do have some Canadian reservation software providers, partners that have been great supporters too. So both sides of the border, we can't do it without them, but definitely the Canadian outlook is growing in terms of the supplier side of things, for sure.
I think something we talk about all the time on the show is the EV stuff, and you mentioned the electrical suppliers. I guess, what's that look like in Canada? Are you seeing more EVs on the road, and is that something campground owners are starting to look at, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely, we are seeing huge growth in terms of our EV ownership, pardon me, up here, and absolute need for charging infrastructure expansion. There are some highly trafficked areas of the country that it's a bit of a wait to get into the charging stations and things like that. So those are hurdles and issues that need to be addressed. Our federal government is actually providing some grant funding specifically for businesses, including campgrounds, to install charging facilities. So we'll have a session specifically about that grant program during the conference, and
Okay.
you can let campground owners know how to apply and what that process looks like. But in a kind of the grand scheme of things, yes, there's a massive push here from our federal government to prioritize that shift to EVs, and I think campgrounds are kind of a natural fit in terms of electrical infrastructure provision and stuff like that. We do have some hurdles in the way. I do have some campground operators really concerned about this in terms of things like the electrical infrastructure being able to support the additional to bear the additional weight of that much more consumption. I have several members who say to me all the time, in the midst of July or August, when we're running 300 air conditioners in here, and I already see brownouts happening. So to add the potential for everybody at every site also plugging their car in, and those kinds of things, there just isn't the supply available for that kind of demand. So we have a few hurdles in our path, some things that need addressing on the political and infrastructure side to get it to where I think the push is going. But we have included a lot of that in our upcoming advocacy messaging that we'll work on in 2023. So I foresee good support on that front. Obviously, it's a big societal shift that's impacting every industry, but it's going to need addressing at the infrastructure provision level.
What was kind of interesting too is I just read an article the other day from Illinois about how they're expecting a decrease in funding from the gas taxes because of more fuel efficient vehicles and the EV trend. So that's kind of something else too that nobody's talked about, is like, what's that funding for the roads and stuff look like? Because I know down here in the US, the majority of the funding for roads comes from gas taxes and different things. So
I know Montana has a law pending right now that would put a surcharge on the electric vehicle purchase just to cover that.
Yeah.
Or attempt to.
Yeah, well, and I agree. I mean, I live in a very oil-rich province. It's our top industry here, and it is top of mind and consistently comes up in conversations. We're kind of in an election phase right now, and so you're definitely hearing those rumbles on either side of the aisle in terms of recapturing that capital. It's going to be really important, I think, to be strategic about how quickly these shifts are happening and thoughtful about recouping that infrastructure support in terms of dollars.
I know here in the US, we've been also seeing a trend towards all year camping. And I know earlier you had mentioned that some places in Canada might be open all year. Is that a trend that, you feel is going to continue to spread, or is it just too cold? People don't want to go to northern Canada.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a bit of a conundrum here, right? I do think there's big appetite to shift lifestyle to that type of format, especially now as we see, the ability to kind of work on the road and be remote and all those things. It really facilitates the option to be more kind of nomadic, and a lot of people love that. And so I do think, obviously, specifically on the West Coast where the climate is very temperate, we do have several year-round properties. There is kind of a dynamic there that it kind of shifts a lot of that over into tenancy as opposed to recreation and outdoor hospitality, and
yeah,
I think that's going to be a factor in some of this too. Depending on your jurisdiction, the legislation can impact what your business model can look like. Even if you're open year round, there may be, I know in some counties, there's the requirement for your guests to not stay full time in that way because it instead shifts over to a tenancy kind of landlord tenant scenario, and those laws and regulations and all of those things are very different. So that's a factor, I think, in some of that. Overall, I think the willingness or interest in that type of lifestyle will continue to grow, especially given kind of how expensive real estate is and those kinds of things. But we will probably remain heavily reliant on campgrounds south of the border for the winter months, simply because we have site inventory issues. There's just, we saw during the pandemic when full-time RVers couldn't head south, our few parks that are accessible in the wintertime and open and operational were booked up, snapped up quick. There were tons of full-time RVers that just kind of had to park and find a place instead and rent a house or whatever instead, because there just wasn't the site inventory available without the ability to cross the border and head into the States. I don't see that changing considering the climate dynamic. It's darn cold up here in the wintertime, and
some people like the cold weather. I'm not one of them. I stay away from the cold as much as possible, but some people really love that. So
well, see, I was born in North Dakota, so I can say that I live in the South now because it's Nebraska South.
Yeah.
So you mentioned glamping as vendors that are your supporters too. That's got to be a relatively new dynamic to camping in general, as far as your members go. And you said that there's quite a few that are adding glamping. Do you have some members that are specifically totally glamping?
I do, yeah. We've got a couple of really unique, cool properties that are doing glamping entirely, and they've got some really ingenious, kind of unique, cool, creative experiences to offer. But the majority of those are pretty rare. We do have several members who are kind of doing a hybrid model or have kind of used glamping as a way to expand or diversify their revenue model by kind of extending into shoulder seasons and offering different experiences that target a different market and those kinds of things. It's been a very strategic move for those members that are making that choice.
You mentioned, the campsite demand. I know down here in the US, we have a lot of developments going on, but there's also definitely areas of the country where it's very difficult to develop parks. It depends really on the zoning and planning. How is that in Canada? Is it easier for can people build parks in Canada? Is it pretty easy? Is it difficult? Does it depend on the area? Are people open to more park developments, I guess?
It does tend to really depend on the area of the country you're in, and even more further down to a micro level. Often really depends on the county, and their overall kind of. Sometimes the constituency really impacts that. Some folks aren't interested in welcoming tourists into their areas and things like that. So, there's a broad amount of variables that impact the answer to that question. I think we definitely are seeing more support in several areas of the country from our at the government level, and that's great to see. So I anticipate we'll continue to see growth and development, but there are some regulatory kind of hurdles and barriers in place that can make it difficult. Changing zoning and things like that is sometimes a really overwhelming uphill climb for developers. But I do think, especially given that we're seeing more and more kind of larger groups both begin to develop but also purchase properties and grow and expand them, that will continue to help the site inventory shortage issues. I did just see an announcement of a smaller hotel group here in Alberta has been purchasing up hotel properties for a few years, but they just bought their first campground. And so, things like that happening, I think, are really going to help shift perspective about, what a campground can do for a group like that can really advocate with their connections that they have at the county and provincial and federal government levels to say, we can really impact the tax situation in this area and all of those things. And so they tend to have a good voice that I think will help the industry overall in terms of perspective about campgrounds and development and things like that. They're going to be good environmental stewards and all of those things, just by nature of the fact that they've got an established experience with on the hotel side, on the hospitality side already.
What's been interesting down here is that we see a lot of complaints before about the fact that people didn't want trailer parks. Like they didn't want, they had this picture of like a trashy trailer park. And then these bigger companies come in and like Sun Outdoors, Northgate, and they're like Blue Water, and they're like, hey, look, we're not building trailer parks. We're building these 200 site beautiful resorts. And then the people complain because it's too big and it's bringing in too many people. So, it's between like a rock and a hard place. So that's been kind of interesting to see. But the perception, I think, down here in the US is definitely changing as to what a campground looks like. For the majority of people, I think there's still a large group of people that picture like a trailer park, when they think of a campground. But that takes time, I guess. So.
For sure. Yeah. And consistent, messaging and communication with officials, but also, consumer targeted effort as well. I think the more campers are out on the roads, the more kind of ability we have to start to shift that perspective and make people see things in a slightly different way, for sure.
Yeah. So as we get ready to wrap up the show, I just wanted to ask real quick, looking 5, maybe 10 years down the road, do you anticipate growth in the Canadian market? Are there any challenges that might, throw a hiccup in there, or do you anticipate just continued growth, I guess?
Yeah, I 100%. I think folks will continue to camp. I think, we've seen on both sides of the border how, even in times of kind of economic instability and things like that, camping tends to be, pretty resilient. I don't anticipate that changing. The EV issue, I think, is going to shift things significantly. That's probably going to be the biggest factor over the next handful of years, in my opinion, about considering getting gas vehicles off the road entirely and stuff like that. The anticipation to do that within that time frame, I think, is going to be really interesting. We've also got this shift to glamping, as great as it is. It's also oftentimes pulling more RV sites out of inventory, right? It's shifting the target demographic to one that can afford to spend $300 a night in a campground or whatever, instead of 50 or 60 for a campsite. So those things, I think, will have interesting impacts on what camping looks like in the next decade or so. But overall, I absolutely see continued growth being a definite. We've got tons of space to do more camping here, and I think if our partners at the manufacturer and dealer associations have anything to say about it, we'll continue to sell RVs as much as possible and add more and more to the road. They've got to have somewhere to go.
Yeah.
One more quick question, Kara. There was a story in RV Travel website this weekend about an automated park, totally automated park, nobody there. It was I think it was $67 a night. Anything like that up in Canada, along Trans-Canada or anything like that?
No, not yet. I could see our provincial and federal parks starting to shift to that. One of their biggest hurdles is labor and getting staffing into some of those remote locations, especially in areas of the country where some of those campgrounds are only open for 6 or 8 weeks of the year.
Yeah.
And so staffing them is really tough. I think those kinds of innovations will probably start applying in places like that first. But to my knowledge, I'm not aware of anything. I know of several operators who are doing automated kiosks already for check-in and things like that are helping with their labor scenario, but nowhere to my knowledge that is completely unmanned.
There you go, Mike. Good investment opportunity. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Kara, for coming on the show. You can learn more about the Canadian Outdoor Hospitality Conference and Expo at cohce.ca, and we'll have the link to that in the description of this video. And it was great catching up, Kara, and hopefully you have a great rest of the winter in Canada. So,
Yeah.
Thanks, Kara.
So yeah, take care. Bye.
Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to WCM's Park Update, a production of Woodall's Campground Magazine. Join us for a new show each Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn for daily news and updates, and subscribe to our news feed on our website at woodallscm.com. Show hosts are Ben Quiggle and Mike Gast. Executive producers Rick Kessler and Alex Burkett. Copyright 2022, G&G Media Group.